Hello, welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we talk about self-care that goes beyond bubble baths, chocolate, and wine. We talk about self-care that transforms from the inside out. It's really a kind of personal development that you do for you with some guidance. It's kind of like life coaching with a very specific focus. And what you can expect from this kind of self-care is a life that, where you feel more fully alive, where your relationships thrive, where you are courageous. It makes a tremendous difference. I'm so glad that you've decided to join me today. I've taken a few weeks off in recovery from the Courageous Self-Care Festival. So if you have been following along, you will know that I spent months and months and months working on an event that was a big deal. If this is your first time listening, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, regardless of whether you've been a follower or you're brand new. So there are a lot of learnings from the Courageous Self-Care Festival, and I'm going to take the next few episodes to unpack what I learned in hopes of helping you better your self-care. That is why I do a lot of what I do. We both get to benefit. When one person prioritizes her own well-being, everyone benefits. And so that is the model that I am guiding with today. I wanted to do the Courageous Self-Care Festival for a variety of reasons. I'm going to share the biggest one with you today. While I was meditating one day last spring, so almost a year ago, I had a download. And this idea came to me for an event. So I'll tell you that part first, and then I'll get into my history with events. So after I finished meditating, I wrote down who I would want to be involved in the event, what I would do there, ideas on what would make it fantastic. And then I looked at my notes and I said, I don't know how to do this. And so I closed up my journal, put it on the shelf, and left it. Then a few months later, I was in a session with a coach of mine. And she said, so I've decided that people in my program are going to put on an event. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have all the information for this. It was truly an example of when the student is ready, the teacher shows up. I worked on this event for, a whole bunch of months. Now, my history with events is this. I have done a variety of retreats and workshops and one-day seminars on my own with mostly what I would call very low results, very limited success. In fact, I would call most of them failures because I didn't leave enough time to promote the events or for people to be able to join me, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I don't have a background in marketing or promoting events. So my specialty is once I get there, people love it. And what always happens up until the festival is that people would look around at the very limited numbers and they would say, I don't understand why more people aren't here. This is life-changing. This is the best event I've ever been to. And I would say, I know. So my specialty was in the delivery of the event until I met this specific coach, and her specialty was in event promotion and marketing and planning the event and getting people to come. Having that background of failures, what I would call failures, you would think that maybe I would get the message that events aren't for me. And if I could barely get 8 people in a room or a dozen people in a room, why would I try to do something so much bigger? Last year, I also read a book called Rejection Proof, and it's based on, or is in conjunction with a TED Talk from an author who realized that his fear of rejection was debilitating. It was really dictating his life and keeping his success very limited. I read this book, Rejection Proof. I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. And I realized that what I had thought was a fear of failure was actually a fear of rejection. And that's why I felt like I could do another event, because it wasn't failure that I was afraid of. It was more this physical pain that I was experiencing it was manifesting as emotional pain. But something I learned reading the Rejection Proof book is that in our brain, when we get rejected, it lights up in the same area as the pain center. It is like, well, for me, it felt like every time I would get rejected, it felt like I was being pierced in the heart with an arrow. It was so painful. Many tears have been shed from my eyes over feeling rejected. And what this author did, I don't remember his name at the moment, but what he did was he wanted to get over this fear of rejection and decided to create a big challenge for himself. He did 100 days where he came up with ridiculous requests from people that he knew and mostly from strangers, and he decided to go for the no, to get rejected, to build up a thicker skin and become rejection proof. I loved this idea, and I didn't want to copy him and do a 100-day challenge, but I thought this festival idea would be a great reason and a great experiment to see if I could indeed reduce my painful reaction to being rejected. So the Courageous Self-Care Festival became my rejection proof experiment and my challenge. I started off with finding speakers, and I decided to go with a pay-to-play model, which means the speakers pay to be on the stage and then they get to speak. So I approached a lot of speakers and I got a lot of rejections. They were painful because I realized I was taking them personally. If you've ever read The 4 Agreements, another great book, one of the main agreements, the second one, is don't take things personally. And that is fully explained in the book, and yet it is easier read than done, for sure. Especially if you have a lot of neural pathways and myelin in your brain built up around taking things personally, which I definitely have. However, what I noticed was someone said yes, and that was really exciting. And then the next person said yes, and then the next person and the next person, until all of the speaker spots were full. Getting those yeses definitely helped reduce the pain of the no's. And I have known for a long time that about 10% of people will say yes to anything that you offer. I knew that in my head. This experiment helped me really get that message at a deeper level. So the speaker spots were filled. Then I moved on to the vendor spots. I wanted to have a wellness marketplace with vendors who aligned with self-care. And I approached many people. It was harder to fill the vendor booths than the speaking spots. And so I got a lot more rejections. And they were somewhat painful at first, not as painful as I had experienced in the past. And then as I received more and more of those rejections with the occasional yes, I felt less pain around the ones who said no. And of course, no one was saying, well, actually a few people did say that they thought it wasn't good value and I had no way to prove that I was going to get the numbers that I was hoping for there. And I took those ones very personally. They were extremely painful because I, more than anything, want to provide value. And so for a few people to outright say, this doesn't seem valuable, it was heart crushing. It's very painful. And I did some forgiveness practices around that. I kept on putting out the requests and the opportunity, which would have stopped me in the past. In the past, if I would have gotten a no, it would have stopped me in my tracks and putting out more requests would have been almost impossible for me, but I was building up this ability to handle rejection with more grace. So I worked on those vendor booths for a few months, and I noticed that the rejections were getting less painful. Then I felt like I had enough of those filled up, and I went on to inviting people for the last couple of months, and I got so many no's. I invited thousands of people personally, and that was a huge amount of effort. Knowing that I was going to get thousands of no's was a daunting thought. But I did get yeses. And I also had the speakers and the vendors putting out invitations. And so I was getting yeses that I didn't even have to put out there. That felt really good. So that's what I noticed, that if you were looking at a graph, the pain of the rejections was going down and down and down as the months went by. And I'll repeat again, I really got an embodied experience. I experienced it not just with my brain and knowing, but a deep cellular experience of when you ask 10 people to do something, one of them will say yes, and it's not personal. It has to do with them, not with you. It had to do with them, not with me. They were not saying no because they didn't like me. And even then, that's not something that we want to take personally. But of course, I like to be liked. Anyways, so that graph of pain went down. The day of the festival came. And I would have thought that I would have felt more stressed around people showing up, but I really trusted my coach's model. I trusted that it would work. She had done it for many years and it worked for her. And I had had a bit of success with it on a smaller scale. That was my most successful event, was when I tried this model, not trying to get hundreds of people there, but more than 10. And it worked. So I had faith. The day of the festival came. I had registrations, hundreds pouring in the weeks leading up to the festival. And on the day of the festival, it turned out that over 200 people came. Oh, it was very exciting. And this experience, in addition to helping me feel less pain from rejection, it helped me understand the amount of effort it takes to make a vision, an idea come into reality. If it's a big vision, it takes so much effort. It takes grit. It takes a plan. It takes activated energy. And I also learned for the next time that I do it that it should take more than one person. I'll get into that in a different episode. What this episode is about is, what we can summarize is, every human being receives big ideas. And in fact, I had someone at the festival say, "So how long has this been a dream of yours?" And I reflected for a moment and I said, you know what? This was never a dream of mine. I never envisioned doing big events. It was an idea that came to me. I trusted my intuition. It felt like a yes. And so I moved forward on it. I got the instruction and guidance on how to do it. And here we are. So every human being has the capacity to receive ideas. And something I said from the stage that day when I was giving my keynote was that I knew that people who showed up were going to have their lives transformed. And that is what every idea is meant to do, is help us transform if we're the one implementing the idea, and also to help the people benefiting from the idea transform as well. So I invite you to tap into one of the core values of courageous self-care, which is curiosity. What is something that you could do, some kind of action you could take, an embodied action, to move through a fear or a set point or a habitual reaction to something that you have to get you through to the other side? So in a nutshell, what I did was I noticed that I had this fear of rejection. I designed a very big experiment and event to help me move through that fear of rejection. And I came through on the other side with so many people benefiting from me having that courage. And that's the same for everyone. This isn't special to me. I'm a regular human being with a lot of fears, a lot of tears, a lot of doubts. And I think the take-home lesson is, how can you get curious or open yourself up to being curious? Design a challenge. It doesn't have to be a huge event. It could be something that you work through just in one day, and see what is waiting for you on the other side. I know for me, I felt extremely exhilarated. I felt like this was a huge success. I had so many other lessons I'm going to share with you in the next few episodes, such as what I'm going to talk about in the next one. Is the next episode of this podcast is why it felt like planning a wedding and what I learned from the amount of energy I invested and what I got out of it on a different personal level, coming at it from a different angle. So I hope that was helpful for you. I certainly enjoy unpacking these lessons and then issuing a challenge, because I know if I can do it, you can do it too. So get curious, notice what is limiting you in your life, design a challenge, whether it's big or small, and feel the amazing aliveness and exhilaration of coming through on the other side, because that is what we human beings are designed to do. Our souls are designed to expand, and pretty much the only way we can move through that is with courage and a plan and support. I love giving resources, and so I have a resource that I would like to invite you to access. Today I'm offering access to the self-care daily checklist. Now, there are 12 foundations of courageous self-care, and this checklist is not just a checklist. It's a document with a number of really useful teachings. You can either use it on your phone, or you can use it on your iPad or on your computer, or you can even print it off and use it as a checklist. And you'll start to notice and learn what courageous self-care is all about and how it can dramatically shift your life. So you can access that on my website. It's at christinamarlette.com. The link is in the description to this podcast. And I will leave you with this final thought. Let me think about what the final thought is. I said this from the stage of the Courageous Self-Care Festival, and I've said it many times on this podcast as well. When one person decides to prioritize their own well-being, and they do it in a way that requires courage and moving through fear, not only does that person benefit from enhanced energy and feeling alive and feeling activated and feeling like life is worth living, like adventurous, everyone around that person. So if you imagine you in the middle, you have a circle of influence and you have relationships, and it could be a very big circle of people that you connect with on a regular basis. So it might be an intimate circle, but every one of those connections benefits from you prioritizing your own well-being. And then it goes out from there. Each of their connections benefits, and it goes on and on and on. So there is nothing selfish about saying, I matter. I deserve to take care of myself. I deserve to give myself loving attention and pay attention to what it is that lights me up. And then when we do that, there's also an energetic ripple that goes out from you throughout the entire globe and even further. And there might be someone on the other side of the globe who is struggling with the same thing that you are, or something that's different. But all of a sudden, he or she receives this energy or this idea that things can be different. And that could come from you. Isn't that a big thought? That is why there's nothing selfish about self-care and loving yourself and showering yourself with attention and giving yourself permission to do what it is that you love to do. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to connecting with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.